All right. Well, thanks for meeting with us today, Janet. Why don't you open up by telling a little bit about who you are and how you got interested in space, and particularly with young kids with Janet's Planet?
It's like my interest in space started in fifth grade. I was 10 years old. I already had been a lover of Star Trek. 1978, 79 is about the time that Star Wars kind of premiered on the big screen. But more importantly than that, I had the most wonderful, amazing fifth grade teacher, Miss Ernestine Yarborough. Anytime I mention her name, I tear up a little bit. She is so much of who I am today. She was the encourager, she was the strong force, she was the enforcer, but she was also the very voice in your ear, literally. In the fall of 1978, I can remember her and Miss Carolyn Davis going out to our playground, and she invited us all and they had their telescopes set up. And I just remember seeing these ladies in bell bottoms pointing out Cassiopeia and pointing. It's like the first time I saw Saturn through a telescope. And again, how powerful would they have been back then? But it's like to just begin to see even those shapes and for them to stand and go, oh, that's that. And oh, look up there. And it was just phenomenal. And I think I fell in love with the thought of not only space and science and constellations and all those kinds of things, but also I thought, I want to be smart like these ladies. And Miss Ernestine Yarborough also had a thing on every Friday. She would come by and she would whisper something in your ear that was meant for you and you alone. And she would sort of threaten anybody. It was like, this is for you. Do not share it. And you're like, yes, ma'am. But what she did, and who knows if she said the same thing to everybody every Friday, I don't know. But she would change it up. You were a good writer this week, or you are so good at science. Now, remember, Janet, science isn't just for the boys. And so this stuff I mean, again, you would feel like the voice of God had just whispered into your ear. And so much of what that was, and I can tell you, I have fifth grade friends. It's like when I refer to my friends, like my childhood friends, they're the ones from fifth grade. And we all hold Miss Ernestine Yarborough with such esteem and credit her for so much of our creativity, our love of science, and that sort of thing. And then fast forward, then I love band and drama and chorus. And then I decide to go to Belmont and major in music. My first real job after college was a theme park. And again, I had aspirations when I went. It's like I still kept up with my sciences. I was still curious, but I thought for sure, dun, 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 there's going to be the record deal. I was even in a group. You guys will laugh. It was called Summer Rose and Ivy. My friend Nan often hosts the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday nights on Circle Access. She's got a show called Authentic America. My other friend Cindy Rose is like sang on demos and all these kinds of things. We sang backup for like this like top 40 band. And at the time when people kind of like said, oh, we can make a little country trio out of the three of you, they had just signed Shania Twain and Toby Keith, and we were on the pitch sheets. But then Mercury and Polygram merged. So it was a Harold Shedd, who was going to be the producer, and then Mike Lawler, who used to be the keyboard player for the Allman Brothers. So we had recorded a few things. We'd go to these meetings and listen to these songs. But at the time, while this whole possibility of a record deal is going on, I'm working at the local theme park in Nashville. And, when I first auditioned, I grew up in rural West Tennessee, so there weren't a lot of dance studios in the country. So I could sing and I could act, but it's like they'd say pas de bourrée, and I'd be like, keep it up here. Just look at the face, people. And so finally I get offered a job at Opryland, but they're like, well, it's with this big costume character and a puppet, and you'll be working with kids. And I was like, hey, I'm going to get a record deal. I can sing and dance all summer, blah, blah, blah. And so that was around 1992. And so we went off and on. I get this job at Opryland, and it was a show called the Opryland Kids Club. I walk into rehearsal May 1992, and all of a sudden, it's like I walk in, I'm 25 years old, these kids come running. Hi, my name's Robin. My name's Natalie. My name's Anita, and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, I'm home. Like my 10-year-old was so doggone happy. So I fell in love with the kids, and if almost I can go back, I was everybody's favorite babysitter. So there is a through line of kids throughout my life. And over the last 30 years, I can't tell you how many times I've gone, I'm going to choose a grown-up job. I'm going to choose something. I'm going to do something else. What am I going to do? And every time there will be a project to write for kids, do curriculum for kids, do a show for kids, da, 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 da. So I'm like, all right, kids, you got me. So again, the record deal went away. Mercury Polygram merged. Our deal went away. And I never really grieved it. Nan and I've talked several times. She's gone on to host all kinds of things for different networks and country countdowns and things. And she's ended up exactly where she was meant to be. And I know in my heart of hearts that I ended up exactly where I was meant to be. So I have this, the record deal doesn't work out, but I'm still singing and dancing with kids. And then that's going to end because the park's going to close. And I go, now what? And that's kind of where the story goes to. I looked around and thought, Janet's Planet. Nice. Everybody had always called me Interplanet Janet. She's a galaxy girl.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, well, I can't be that. That's copyrighted. But nobody, funny enough, I was, again, you know, those times when you're going, some kind of something is working with you and kind of guiding you, because I had one of the dads of the kids that I work with at the kids club said, you should really go ahead and try to trademark that. Let me do a little research for you. And sure enough, nobody had the trademark to Janet's Planet. And I planted my flag there and thought, and then I should do science, because there's only Bill Nye the Science Guy in Beekman's World. So where are the girls?
See, that's the story I remember when you did the TED Talk for us here at the when we were doing it at the Weiss School, and I really remembered how instrumental. I think you were influential even for the girls in the audience by saying, you know, here's this guy, everybody knew him, but there was no one who looked like me out there. So one of the areas of research that we've been looking into recently is the idea of science identity, and how we start really early forming the idea of I'm not a math kid, or I'm an English kid, and that, you know, by seeing someone like you speak and figuring out early on that, wow, I see a guy doing it. I don't see anyone who looks like me. Instead of shying away from that, it's more like I need to throw myself into this world. And that's a really, really powerful place to be.
You know what? It was just that moment where I realized, you know, I have friends that do beautiful music for kids and kind of like even target even younger kids. But the age of kids that I performed with were roughly between 3rd and 6th grade. And I had such a kinship with those kids. I thought, those are the kids I want to target. I don't know that I can contain them with, you know, this other stuff. So what can I offer them that isn't being offered? And so Rumi has a quote that says, whatever you are seeking is also seeking you. And I think it was just that moment where you go, all right, I'm going to plant my flag. Let's see what happens. And then again, nobody's ever going to ask me to write the MBA business plan of how I did it. I went about it completely backward way and just felt my way through things. But a door was opened at local public television, and pretty much the rest is history. I'm sure it's like, I've looked back at some of those first spots I produced. Like there was a homemade jacket that I think I bought at Goodwill. I even like glued some JPSA for the JP Space Academy. So see, I was always supposed to end up with the Janet's Planet Academy. And so it's like, and I think I even put duct tape on a hat. It's a ridiculous costume, but
yeah, but you just have to get started, right? Like it's one of the things that we got started with a podcast, was we don't know how to do it. We just kind of started. I know Kevin has a question for you.
Sure.
So let him go.
I'm going to throw out 4 subjects, and I would like to know, from the time that you started Janet's Planet until today, would you say that maybe your emphasis on these topics has changed, or maybe there's a different one? So I wrote down rockets, astronomy, astronauts, or aerospace science. Is there any one of those that you said that's my happy place, or is there a blend? And has that changed over the 20 plus years?
Yeah, I would say my happy place was always astronomy and the solar system. That
Okay.
was where I felt like, all right, I'm going to share the solar system because that's that power of like, here's this thing we're a part of. I think over the years, it's really shifted to rockets and aviation. Um, Along the way, I've met these wonderful people in the aerospace industry who, you know, all of a sudden you're like, oh, if I teach kids how that blasts off, oh, if we teach people how planes fly, hey, how about we get them involved in Civil Air Patrol or, you know, the EAA's Young Eagle program. And then all of a sudden we're really cultivating that pipeline for aerospace. So I think early on, I was just interested in kids getting interested in the solar system or science. I think what's changed for me more than even the topics has been, oh, we have some power here to direct and maybe launch some lives where they need to go. Ooh, that is one of the things that, that again is another thing that I try to hang on to that Mr. Yarborough did. It's just like I call that kid, the kindergartner in the after school class, astronaut Aiden. I want him to believe that that's a possibility for him. So I say that. Yesterday afternoon, I was talking to some kids in San Antonio, and this little guy, Joseph, is telling me about how he really thinks that, you know, we should make the Moxie on Perseverance a lot bigger. And why didn't they? And why hadn't they tested it out before? And I was like, well, you know what, you little engineer, let's, why don't I just introduce you to some people at NASA at JPL and let's get you on that Moxie 5000 that should be there. So that's what I believe is that I think it's switched from just like, okay, here's an introduction to, oh, now this is how it works to, oh, let's really see what your inherent intrinsic talents are kind of leaning towards. Doesn't mean that's where you have to end up or where it's the only thing you can be, but let's sort of start pinpointing you so that you're filling that eventual pipeline for STEM.
Sure. I call that dream enabling, right? The difference in being, you know, having a rich fantasy life or being delusional and then enabling a dream is if somebody can show you how to get there. So I feel like that's important, right? It doesn't matter if the child changes their mind down the road. They just have to know when they're young that that's a
Possibility.
definite possibility. So very good.
Let me
And I think to that end, on the dream enabling, I find so often, and you guys find it too, and I know you do, it's like you'll get the kid that for whatever reason you and sometimes I don't even, I would prefer sometimes not even knowing a lot of the backstory, but there's so much that you, after you've been an educator and a teacher for so long, you kind of go, oh, this one's going to need some propping up because something either has happened or isn't part of their construct at the moment. So they are in my path, and I am to pour every good, awesome, encouraging thing I can. It doesn't mean that I'm totally responsible for, you know, changing that, but it is my responsibility to make sure that I notice it, give as much as I can to it, and then pray that next good adult does the same thing.
Yeah, that's definitely something that is both a blessing and a curse when it comes to dealing with children, right? Because you want to do so much, but you can only do so much at the same time.
I just think there's nothing more sad than a kid with enormous potential, but no one's really watering the plant, so to speak. That's tough.
Let me just for the sake of time here, switch gears to, so we've learned a little bit now about your interest with the kids in general, the idea of Janet's Planet, how that came about. And there's so much more. Obviously, we'll share out your social media sites at the end so that you can people can check out those. But let's shift now to Explore Mars and the work that you do with the adults. So how do you manage to go from I'm working with my kids in the daytime and then I'm meeting with the adults later? You're president and of that organization. Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, even though that whole journey has been very interesting, when I first went to even a space conference, was probably the ISDC. I think even it's like I met Kevin a few years later down in Huntsville there. That would have been around 2010, 2011.
It was.
But my first one was around 2008. And again, I sort of showed up and you feel like a bit of an outsider, and then you start getting to know people. The great thing about the space industry, for anybody out there listening, is that if you want to get involved, there's an organization or a group of people who will put you to work if you show up and go. I mean, largely nonprofit, largely all volunteers, that are trying to push some of these policies and, hopes and plans for future space missions forward. But I just, all that I can tell you, even with how I got to be president, is the first Human to Mars Summit that I attended. I went up and met CEO Chris Carberry and President Artemis Westenberg and said, I really, really like your conference. What do you do with kids? What's your outreach? And they're like, oh, we really don't do any. And I was like, I'll do it for you. Like, what do you need? Let's do something here. And so it was really, again, the kid thread. And I said, hey, so the first year, I think we had Boy Scouts. And then the next year we had a ton of Girl Scouts. And then it was kind of like a combination of Boys and Girls Clubs or more Girl Scouts. And then it's like, I guess back in 2019, Artemis gave me a call. She was starting up Explore Mars Europe. And Chris and Rick talked to me and they said, we really, you're one of the top contenders. Would you be interested? And I sat with it and I thought, why? They could get somebody with a lot more experience and rocket propulsion scientist, astrophysicist, somebody to do this. And it dawned on me that it's like, no, it's like, in a way, it doesn't matter whether it's kids or adults, it's all outreach. And how do we make space relevant, not just for the scientists and researchers and engineers, but how do we make space relevant for the general public, for the kind of fan, for the sort of, enthusiast, for the curious? How do we make it really kind of like spaces for everybody? So I thought, all right, let me try my hand and see what we can do. So it's been an incredible honor and a privilege to work alongside the leadership of Explore Mars. We have a fantastic group of board of directors and board of advisors, and that we keep adding to that. And, in the last, who knew that in the year that I would, that I would become president in the, May of 2019 with all kinds of aspirations of what 2020 would look like. But we quickly, one of the things we knew way back, 11 months ago when shutdown was happening, and we were pretty sure that having an in-person Human to Mars conference at national academies wasn't going to happen. I remember we were all on a phone call and we were talking about the first webinar we were going to do. And we were talking about how much do we pay for it. And I was like, hey guys, I just lost most of the way that I make income. People are going to remember us more for what we do right now. Those are our optics, really, right? I mean, they're going to remember how we delivered content, how we met a need, how we entertained them through a weird time. And I said, for now, I think we've got to come up with ways that we give this away. And then we figure out if there's a donation or something along the way. So everybody agreed with that. Again, you have to know, nobody was trying to like make money. Well, of course, we're trying to we're just trying to sustain the organization. And again, that's always top of mind when you're looking at a nonprofit. For anybody out there who knows, it's like the ever-ending cycle of grants and people and fundraising and sponsorship, which Chris Carberry does an amazing job at. But that was one of the things that we feel very proud of in the year 2020, is that we went quickly to having something called Drinks with Explore Mars. It was happening every week. Now it's a kind of bi-monthly occasion, but people needed a place to connect, and so we called it come share a drink and let's be alone together. And and then we just talk about Mars topics. And so through this experience, I have met so many industry people I may never have gotten a chance to know or even collaborate with otherwise. And so it's been a great honor. But I think in my mind, I go, it doesn't matter whether you are, 8, 9, 10 and dreaming of going to Mars, or if you're 45, 55, or 65 dreaming of Mars. Generally, you just want good content and you want the hope of going.
Right.
Well, speaking of, post COVID now, I know we talked a little bit earlier about the idea of how important it is to pivot in times that are, you're not sure of what's happening. So you've managed to pivot in all kinds of ways, including, as you talk about, outreach, not just with what you're doing with Explore Mars, but also with those students that you have. So what would you like to share out about how your outreach has changed, maybe with students of need or even around the country?
It's been very interesting. If somebody had asked me or told me a year ago, January, and said, Janet, forget about touring, forget about doing any in-person camps, you're going to switch everything to online, I'd have been like, no, and no thanks. Little did I know. So March hits and everything on my Janet's Planet calendar just begins to get erased. And I literally on a Monday afternoon kind of sat down and cried in my coffee and was like, what am I going to do? And a voice kind of like in my heart and head said, you need to be with some kids. I was like, yeah. So naively, very naively, I did not have a plan. I should get plans, but that seems to be a running theme. I just build the parachute on the way down. And so I put it out on the old Facebook. Hey guys, anybody want to come and like learn about the solar system tomorrow? At 26 kids show up. All right, come back tomorrow. Let's see what we can do.
I remember that. I mean, because we were friends on Facebook, and I'm watching kind of like, just as it was unloading, I was like, check her out. And then I remember you're like, oh, it went from 20. Now we have 50. Now we have 500. Like so many kids. And many of my high school friends that I know got to know you through your outreach efforts that way as well. So
no, it was crazy. And I think it was nobody knew what to do. Everything was closed. Somebody needed something. There was a place to congregate. And then what I started doing was asking all of my sweet space industry friends, hey, you're into sustainability. Come talk to the kids about how that relates to space. Hey, you're building space suits there, Dr. Ryan Kobrick. Come talk to my kids about that. And I had golly, a humongous thank you to all of the great folks who had said, sure. What awesome. Again, we were all kind of in the same boat.
right. They were bored sitting at home with nowhere to go too. It worked out for everybody, all your astronauts, everybody who would come in and speak to the kids. I mean,
it was, I think it's like, I remember telling my husband somewhere during that time, I was like, I can't believe, like, and I again, naively thought, I'll do this for a few weeks, maybe till the end of April when all of this is over. Right. And so then I kept going. It's like we get to the end of April and nothing is like, nothing's concluding. So we go on through May and it was hilarious. We hold a little online kind of graduation. I pretend like I'm passing them, diplomas. And they're like, but Miss Janet, we don't really want to, like, we want them to meet. And so then we created this, I had the kids name it. So we went from the Janet's Planet Astronaut Academy to the Summertime Club, was the JP Emporium of awe and wonder. It was, so they named it. So I was like the Emporium. So Monday through Friday, we would meet and here's in the summertime, I knew some things were kind of getting back, or at least people were having more of a work schedule and that sort of thing. So one day I was like going, what am I going to teach today? So I find this experiment book. It was all about lemons. I was like, I got lemons. So we made everything from lemon soda to we did lemon, kind of like lemon infused like rockets with baking powder. And we tested if lemon juice or if, vinegar worked better. And again, simple stuff. And then I was like, oh, and then everybody goes, Miss Janet, I know this. And I was like, so tomorrow, every one of you will share an experiment. And I thought, that's a bit of genius, Janet, let them teach you. I was like, got it. And so by sometime midsummer last year, somebody said, NASA's offering a grant, you should apply. And I have to even say that normally I've been, I've got a bit of Janet's Planet's Explore Science Foundation is my nonprofit side. I've got Janet's Planet Inc. as my for-profit side. And, the nonprofit sits over there. We get a few funds, we give it out and give it to scholarships to kids. And I thought, might be time to exercise a bit more of that. And I don't even know how. Again, it was one of those just moments where, based on what we'd done in the spring, we had some good data to say, here's how we can continue this in the fall and spring of 2020, 2021. And, here we are still. So the many lessons that I've learned, and we could talk for forever on this one. Virtual learning is learning. It's different from being in a classroom, because in a classroom, like energetically, you can kind of feel that. And, you guys were talking a little bit about whether a kid has their camera on or doesn't have it, or this much, or, you're going, hey, Lucas, pull your shirt down. Or, do you know what I mean? It's like, or you have the, never ending interrupter. Miss Janet. Yes. And is it on topic? Usually not. And so again, you learn that sometimes when Sabrina, whose cat Henry was very sick before Christmas, and then the mom emails me and says, I know she's talked a lot about the cat, but it's got a tumor and we're trying to just make it through Christmas. And so if she needs to talk about the cat, so we let her talk about the cat. Or we had a young man whose father passed away from COVID. So we rallied, and we didn't talk to Tim about it unless he wanted to talk about it. But you want to stay online and play a little Minecraft, Jesse? Yeah. So again, it becomes, by Christmas, when we held a Christmas party, a lot of these kids are like talking to each other like they're family. And these are kids who would not normally have connected. Here are, this little girl in Alabama is wanting to stay and crochet online and teach each other how to crochet with a kid in New Jersey. Or a kid in Alabama is connecting with a kid in Karachi, Pakistan, because they love to design and build games in Minecraft. So all of a sudden you've got these connections that you wouldn't else have had. I mean, none of us are going to sit here and go, it doesn't matter whether it's in the classroom or online. Education is hard, because maintaining each and every little soul's attention and getting them what they need, it's such a process. And you guys know this all too well. But in the wake of the world being different than we've ever known it, what we're learning and what we're getting better at. I'm so much better at handling a Zoom classroom now than I was when I started, 11 months ago. So it's an ever-changing process. And, but I knew that if I didn't, I suppose I should say 11 months ago, I needed purpose. There was nothing for me to do. It's like I couldn't go see my dad. I couldn't go see my family. We couldn't even see our grandkids. I needed something to wake up and to do each day. And that was the gift and the silver lining that came through.
I will only share that before Zoom, I used whiteboards a lot. I'm a visual learner, so I draw big pictures. But after Zoom, I've become great at the 3x5 note card. So all of my formulas, I teach from a 3x. If I'm online with kids on Zoom, that's about as big as I can really connect with them on. But you're right. We've had to adjust. Whether it's better or worse, it's what we have to work with. So that's another, we have to be pragmatic about this until things improve a lot. So
have you run into any issues with some of your online experiences? And we'll keep this as kind of the last question before we wrap things up. But I know that it's always a question of equity when it comes to whether or not someone has access. And we talk about encouraging people to love STEM from all backgrounds and all areas. But when we talk about online learning, there are always those students who might not have access to technology. Have you run into any of those situations with some of the kids in inner cities that you like to work with, or how do you circumvent that?
So here's a thing that I learned recently, and this was very interesting to me, that when we talk about the digital divide, the biggest thing for me, but I'll have it happen even hardwired here, and I live kind of like not quite the suburbs, not quite the country, do you know what I mean? Somewhere in between there, but we'll have, inconsistent internet. So a lot of times you can see this whether the kid lives in a rural area or, downtown or wherever. You have some, connectivity issues. I recently found out that it's like most people have either a phone or like they've at least got a smartphone and they're connecting. But let's face it, a kid who doesn't have a home computer or doesn't have a laptop or a tablet, even if the tablet was given to them by the school, does not have the same kind of workability. And certainly if you're zooming on a phone, you don't even really see the chat. So to me, it's like, and this was just an idea introduced to me because I was thinking that digital divide meant you don't have the technology. And this grad student said, Janet, I would like for you to think about it differently. And so this kind of changed my mind about how I talk about it. It's not so much that because again, a phone is pretty ubiquitous with anybody. And it's like, here's what another thing I found out for a very rural place right outside of Virginia is we were going to do all of this. So I was going to have them register through, I register through Zoom, and then they would get the Zoom link and the password. Well, again, nobody read the entirety of the email. They just thought they could click the link. There were tons of connectivity issues. And then the district person finally comes back and says, no, we actually only use Google Meet. And I was like, why did somebody tell me you only use Google Meet? We would have done that. And so, but it's like I realized there was a parent who somehow had gotten my email and said, well, I'm going to be at work, but my son is going to have my phone. So to me, the divide is either not really, and especially if you're dealing with elementary kids. Now, again, they learn over time how to input that Zoom code or that Zoom password or click the link. And again, for, early on last year when Zoom was the place everybody was going and it was so overloaded and getting Zoom bombed, I even had that horrible experience, is that you started putting in all of these safety protocols to try to keep kids and you safe. And then you realize you can keep it so safe if a kid doesn't know how to jump through.
It's a barrier for them to get online.
It's a barrier. So I'm beginning to think about it now. Granted, we still have people that don't have the technology, don't have the phone, don't have the computer, those things. So you have that one vertical, right, of people that you're going, we got to get them access with a smart tablet or something there so they can actually get on with us. Then you got to have really good internet or, a good connective kind of source there. That can depend on whether, they're paying the bill. Maybe they're using the hotspot off of something else that's pinging around the apartment complex or something. And then you get to the point that sometimes the divide happens where people even the parents that, again, have been trying to keep work going and stuff are still trying to figure out, which are we doing? Are we doing, this one's GoToWebinar, this one's WebEx, this is Google Meet, this is this. They all have a bit, God bless them all and free conference call, everybody who's done anything to keep us online and connected. God bless you all.
Right.
But I think it's that. And so then when you begin to peel back those layers and realize it's almost like you have to even start before you begin any of the curriculum you want to do. Let's make sure we all know, here's how we're logging on. Here's where do you do? And that is why for a couple of the things, I haven't changed the link or the password now in a year. It has stayed the same because for all the kids who are used to it, it's already programmed there,
Yeah.
So it just makes it easier. So yes, there is a divide, but it isn't just lack of a device. It's sometimes lack of a device, lack of connectivity, and then lack of know-how.
Sure. You mentioned one. I'll just tell you one short thing. North Carolina, the school we work with on a project, I watched online a county school board meeting, and their biggest debate was how to divide the hotspots they had, because even the kids that had devices, doesn't matter if you have a computer and no connectivity, but the hotspots were precious, right? The goal of how do you distribute a finite number of hotspots to all the kids out there?
I mean, it's like I've heard of communities. There's one in Southern California. It was a brilliant guy, a district leader who was putting hotspots on buses and then putting buses parked in various areas.
Oh,
That's
that's
And,
brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
you know what I mean? And it's like, I know that they've done that even in my hometown of Covington, Tennessee, that you put the hotspot on the bus. So while they're traveling on the bus, they can get some of the work done.
yeah.
And then later, after everybody's delivered at home, you go
The
and park the
neighborhoods.
buses
Yeah.
in places that need it most. So there's still a lot to be, you know, a lot to be conquered. And here's my hope. And this, again, kids in the next year or so are going to get a lot of grading on the curve. So we'll see, will we see the effects of what learning in the pandemic did or did not do? Kids are still super, super curious. One way that I have averted anybody, it's like you can find this stuff. So I've even taken to, for my Metro Nashville after school program, I've taken to delivering them on Sunday afternoons to the places that the United States Post Office apparently doesn't know, or you know what I mean? There's the same address that keeps popping up. So I'm not even putting postage on it. Just going to drop it off in your mailbox. Like I need a day out, put my mask on and go around and deliver it. Or it's like, it's not too hard to go, all right, who's got a paper towel roll? Anybody got some Solo cups? Now let's make a little like sound activity and figure out how to make a Bluetooth speaker. And even if it's stuff like, hey, anybody got paper? Let's fold some origami. And again, it's getting things because they love creating. Like I had kids a couple of weeks ago, we created our own, mission patches. And again, just cut out a circle, cut out a triangle, show me what you got. What's your thing? What's your Latin phrase? Ooh, let's look up some Latin. Et luna ad martem or whatever. And so then all the kids are going, I didn't know Google Translate could take this and stuff, and they're translating it to Latin. And so one of the best ones was a little kid named Nina, and it was like, all aboard the Friendship Express. And then she had translated that in Google Translate to Latin. I don't even remember what it was.
That's multiple learning layers, As we close out, what we'll do is I know that we have so many other topics to talk about. And maybe as we get ready to launch this new contest that Explore Mars is going to be setting forward in regards to Mars, maybe we can meet again and just do a little quick promo for that. And we'll do that one separately. But if I were to ask you in our last few minutes, if you have any advice for either that kid out there who maybe doesn't see him or herself in a particular role, or even for an educator who might be frustrated during these times, what is your takeaway for this audience?
For any student out there who's listening, come in close for this. So let me tell you, I know that you are awesome and that you're the smartest people on the planet. Shh, don't even tell Miss Shauna, Mr. Kevin, who are interviewing me that, all right? You guys have this. I trust you implicitly. I hear you coming up with ideas. And even if you decide to use it as a joke or a bit of sarcasm, you're just testing out the waters. But the truth is, you guys have got some great brains. You're living in the most technological time ever. You're going to see the most amazing advances. You're going to see people go back to the moon. You're going to see people go to Mars. You're going to see people trying to build hotels in cislunar space and everything like that. I am not worried about you guys at all. If you got behind, you're going to catch up. And if it's like, and it's up to you, maybe the greatest lesson, you guys might actually be the most resilient, flexible, amazing, adaptable, collaborative generation that has ever existed, all because of what you've experienced. Now, for you adults out there, here's the deal. It's high time we start acting like the most noble and right characters with our tones, our talk, our speeches, our words, because they matter. Kids pick up on everything. And it's like, we will never solve inequality, injustice, or somehow figure out this whole diversity and inclusion thing and equity thing if we as adults don't start acting and behaving correctly ourselves. it is always trickle down behavior, trickle down economics, all of that sort of thing. So my big call to all of you adults out there is like, let's start being those heroes for these little ones. They are listening, they are watching. And the other thing is, if you have been in the trenches and you have been wearing that mask 8 hours a day in schools and taking a week off when somebody comes in and there's been contact, and then you come back in and you're teaching from home and you're doing it all over again, God bless you. Thank you for all of you who have delivered curriculum to your students' houses and called and made sure that everybody's okay and that you've checked in on them. Because in so many, many ways, I do believe that it's like there's never been a better time for us to stand up, stand and walk in our purpose, no matter how exhausted we might be. The truth is, if you are an educator and a parent right now, there's a great deal being asked of you, but you are up for the task. You can do it. And what's the reward out there for you is having a really great kid who is empowered, encouraged, inspired, and a really great crewmate of planet Earth.
Thank you once again for being with us, Janet Ivey. We look forward to talking with you again soon. And I'm going to go ahead and put your information in our details, but would you like to share out your website or any social media before you go?
Please give us a look at janetsplanet.com. We are offering free astronaut classes. Kind of our main ages are K through 6, but they are indeed free, so check that out. Always on Facebook, Janet's Planet, and Twitter. That's Janet's Planet is Facebook and Twitter. Janet's Planet Official is YouTube and Instagram. So find us there.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.